The late afternoon sun slanted through the old trees of rural Virginia, spilling gold across the narrow road that wound toward Langford estate. Behind its tall iron gates and endless acres of woods stood a world apart, guarded and silent, where Victor Langford lived out his exile. Once a financial titan who could bend Wall Street to his will, Victor was now a shadow of that legend, an aging billionaire who had lost his family, his warmth, and most of his interest in the outside world. But the most feared presence on that estate wasn't Victor. It was Shadow, a massive black dog, lean and muscled, with eyes like shards of cold glass and jaws built to break bone. Shadow didn't bark. He didn't warn. He growled like a verdict. Trainers had come confident and eager and left in ambulances, one with stitches across his leg, another with a shattered arm. No one wanted to go near the animal again. No one but Victor. People whispered that he didn't keep Shadow out of affection, but out of something deeper. A housekeeper once noticed an old photograph on Victor's desk. A boy no more than 10 sat on a wooden porch, his arms wrapped around a dog, almost identical to Shadow, only gentler in the eyes. Scrawled across the border of the photo were the words, "Me and Ranger, 1969. From then on, the staff knew Shadow wasn't just a dangerous animal to Victor. He was memory, perhaps the last fragile string tying the man to a childhood he had never let go. And then, one cold morning, as mist clung to the meadows, Victor stepped outside and made a declaration that rippled through every corner of the estate. His voice was low, firm, carrying the weight of finality. $1 million, he said, to whoever can make Shadow gentle again. Not obedient, not trained. Gentle, trusting. At first, some thought it was a joke. But when they met Victor's gaze, steel gray unblinking, no one dared laugh. This wasn't about money. This was a desperate wager from a man clinging to something the world couldn't see. Miles away in the forgotten edges of a Virginia town, an 11-year-old girl curled beneath the broken awning of an abandoned store. Her name was Elena. People called her nothing really, just another street kid, the kind of shadow the world stepped around without noticing. She knew how to disappear in crowds, how to quiet her breath so no one could hear her cry, how to stretch $2 into food that lasted the day. Her memories of family were little more than smoke, a voice humming a lullaby, the smell of waffles on a Sunday, then nothing but years of cold, of hunger, of drifting. She was invisible until that day. Elena was crouched near a parking lot when she overheard 2 truck drivers talking as they leaned against their rig. One of them shook his head, laughing. "Old man Langford's gone crazy. He's offering $1 million to anyone who tames that beast of his." The other scoffed. "Not just any beast. That dog ripped a trainer's arm to pieces. Nobody in their right minds touching it." Elena didn't move, didn't blink. She just listened. $1 million meant nothing to her. She couldn't imagine it, couldn't spend it in her mind. But the dog caught her heart in a way she couldn't explain. A creature no one trusted. A creature feared and unwanted. Like her. That night, Elena lay shivering under the corrugated roof, hunger clawing at her belly. But her thoughts weren't on food or sleep. They circled back to the dog over and over. And for the first time in years, a small, fragile spark lit in her chest. Maybe he doesn't need someone strong. Maybe he just needs someone like me. Elena woke before the sun. The streets were still half asleep, wrapped in fog and the hum of distant sirens. Her back ached from the concrete. But that morning, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. She didn't have an address. She didn't even know if she could find the place. All she had was a name she'd heard in passing Langford estate, and a stubborn certainty that it existed somewhere beyond the highways, past the city's noise. She tightened the laces on her broken sneakers, slung a cracked plastic water bottle over her shoulder, and started walking. At first, the streets were familiar alleys, painted with graffiti corner stores, locked behind iron grates, the rust of train tracks cutting through gray neighborhoods. But as the hours passed, the buildings gave way to open fields, dirt roads, and stretches of tall grass. Elena stopped strangers along the way, asking for directions. Some shrugged. Some laughed. A few pointed vaguely toward the horizon. "Keep walking, kid. It's out there somewhere, but you're wasting your time." She didn't turn back. By midday, her lips were dry, and her legs burned with every step. Once, she nearly stepped on a snake that slithered across her path. Twice, she thought about quitting. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw the dog shadow alone, behind a fence waiting. Something inside her pushed her forward. The sun had dipped low when she finally spotted it. A tall wooden gate flanked by iron bars, a pair of security cameras watching in silence. Beyond the gate, the hills rolled endlessly dotted with buildings, too far away to make out clearly. Elena's knees shook, and her stomach growled with hunger. But she stepped closer, pressed her small hand to the cold metal, and whispered almost to herself, "I made it." The first time she knocked, no one came. She waited, gripping the bars, her eyes scanning the shadows. Minutes stretched into an hour. Just when she thought no one would ever show, a figure emerged. A guard. Tall, broad-shouldered uniform, crisp, mirrored sunglasses, reflecting Elena's dirt-streaked face back at her. "What do you want, kid?" he asked flatly. Elena's voice was quiet but steady. "I heard about the dog. Shadow, I want to try." The guard's lips twitched into something between a laugh and a snort. "You, that mutt would eat you alive. Go home." "I don't have one," she replied simply. He didn't answer, didn't even bother to open the gate. He just turned and walked away. But Elena didn't leave. That night, she curled up by the gate jacket, zipped to her chin, knees tucked against her chest. Coyotes howled in the distance, and the wind sliced through her thin hoodie. But she stayed. When the guards returned in the morning, she was still there. By the third day, whispers began among the staff. "The girl at the gate. She hasn't left once. Crazy little thing. Someone, a groundskeeper, maybe slipped her half a sandwich." He didn't speak, just set it down and walked off. Elena nodded in thanks, chewing slowly, as if afraid the food might vanish. On the fourth morning, a different guard stood watching her, older, quieter. He studied her for a long time before pressing his radio to his lips. "Sir," he said, "there's a kid here. Been coming back every day. Says she wants to meet Shadow." The line crackled with static, then silence. Finally, a deep voice answered, "I'll be there in 10. Elena's heart thudded, but she didn't move. She stayed exactly where she was, hands clasped, eyes steady. The crunch of polished boots on gravel was the first sound she heard. She didn't need to look up to know. She felt it, the weight of someone important. Victor Langford. The billionaire himself. The man behind the $1 Million Challenge. The recluse whose name still sent ripples through boardrooms, even though he hadn't shown his face in public for years. He wore a dark overcoat despite the heat, his silver hair combed neatly back, his jaw set in stone. His presence was like gravity. It pulled the air taut around him. He stopped just a few feet from her. The guards fell silent, stepping aside. "You're the one who's been waiting," he said. His voice was low-controlled. Elena nodded. Why, her answer came softly but without hesitation. "I heard no one could reach Shadow. Maybe that's why I should try." Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, or maybe memory. "He's not safe," he warned. "I know. And you think you can help him?" "No," Elena said simply. "I don't think I can fix him. I think maybe he doesn't need to be fixed. Maybe he just needs someone to stay." The silence stretched taut as wire. For a long moment, Victor just stared at her as if searching her face for cracks. Finally, he removed his sunglasses. His eyes were tired, heavy with the weight of years and losses that no money could erase. He looked past her toward the distant kennels, then back. "Be here at sunrise," he said. "You'll have one chance." Elena didn't thank him. She just nodded, calm and steady, as if she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. The next morning, the air carried a sharp chill. Mist still hugged the fields as Elena walked through the iron gate for the first time. Her sneakers sank into the damp grass, her hoodie clinging to her thin frame. Guards and handlers whispered among themselves, watching with folded arms. None of them believed she'd last 5 minutes. Victor Langford stood off to the side, a silent figure in a dark coat. His posture was rigid, his eyes unreadable, but his presence radiated expectation. He wasn't here for spectacle. He was here to see if the impossible could happen. Across the yard, the kennel door creaked open. Shadow emerged like a storm. His coat gleamed black under the pale sunrise, his muscles coiled with dangerous energy. The leash clipped to his thick collar was attached to a reinforced post, sunk deep into the earth. But even so, the handlers took 2 steps back the instant he appeared. The air changed. Every heartbeat seemed to sync with his growl, low and guttural, vibrating through the ground. His eyes locked on Elena, sharp, predatory, unblinking. Elena didn't run. She walked slowly until she stood just beyond the range of the tether. Shadow-lunged teeth bared the chain, jerking taut as dirt scattered beneath his paws. The sound of his snarl tore through the silence, but Elena didn't flinch. She lowered herself gently onto the grass, folding her legs beneath her, and rested her hands on her knees. She didn't speak, didn't move. She just knelt, breathing steadily. The men watching shifted uncomfortably. One handler muttered, "We should pull her out before." But Victor lifted a hand, silencing him. His eyes never left the girl. Minutes passed. Shadow lunged again, circling, testing the chain, his body a taut wire of aggression. Dust rose each time his paws struck the ground. Yet Elena remained still, her gaze soft-fixed just beyond him, not directly into his eyes. She wasn't challenging him. She was letting him watch. 10 minutes, then 15. The snarl faded into heavy panting. His ears twitched. His pacing slowed. For the first time, Shadow didn't look like a monster ready to kill. He looked uncertain, Elena noticed. Slowly, carefully, she reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a crumpled granola bar, the last thing she had saved from the day before. She unwrapped it with quiet patience and placed it in front of her on the ground. Then she moved her hand away. Shadow's eyes flicked between the food and the girl. His body remained rigid, muscles tense, but his growl softened into silence. He sniffed the air pause, shuffling forward 1 step. Then another. The chain rattled faintly. He stopped inches away from the food, close enough that Elena could feel the warmth of his breath. His teeth were bared not in a snarl, but in hesitation. Elena lowered her eyes, speaking just loud enough for him to hear. "It's okay. I'm not here to make you do anything. I just want to be here." The sound of her voice, gentle without demand, slipped into the air like a thread of warmth. Something in Shadow shifted. Not much, just a flicker like a flame catching after too many nights of cold. He leaned down, took the granola bar in his jaws, and then, against every prediction, sat down beside her. Silence fell over the field. No one moved. Even the birds seemed to pause mid-song. Victor took a step forward, gravel crunching beneath his polished shoes. The handlers glanced at each other in disbelief. The impossible dog, the untouchable beast, now sat quietly beside a child. No one had noticed before yesterday. "You did it," Victor said. His voice low, astonished. "No one else has ever gotten this close." Elena didn't answer. Her hand reached slowly, gently, and brushed along Shadow's back. He didn't flinch. His breathing steadied his body, relaxing against her side, as if he'd been waiting for this touch all his life. Victor's eyes hardened with memory. For a split second, he didn't see Shadow. He saw Ranger the dog from his childhood, the one who had once been his only friend. He swallowed hard. "The $1 million is yours, as promised." Elena looked up at him, then her small hand still resting on Shadow's fur. "I don't want the money." The words dropped into the silence like a stone in water. Victor raised an eyebrow, studying her. The guards exchanged puzzled glances. "Then what do you want?" he asked. Elena's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the flicker of a wound long carried. "I want a room. Somewhere safe. A bed that no one will throw me out of. 2 meals a day. And I want to go to school." Her words weren't loud. They weren't dramatic. But they landed with more weight than $1 million ever could. Victor said nothing for a long time. He looked at her. Then at Shadow, who now watched him, not with hostility, but with calm alertness, as if waiting for Victor's answer too. Finally, Victor exhaled, the hard lines of his face softening just a fraction. "You'll live in the main house," he said. "We have an extra room. You'll eat with me, and we'll get you enrolled first thing tomorrow." Elena's shoulders relaxed for the first time in years. She didn't cry, not out loud, but she nodded once, a quiet thank you etched in her gaze. Victor placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't know what you've done here," he murmured. "Not just for him. For me too." That night, Elena slept in a real bed. The mattress cradled her small body, the sheets smelled faintly of lavender, and the pillow felt like it had been waiting for her all along. Outside her door, Shadow lay curled on the floor ears, twitching at every sound, his massive body standing guard against a world that had never been kind. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He simply waited loyal and silent beside the girl who had taught him to trust again. And across the hall, Victor sat alone with the old photograph in his hands. The Boy and Ranger 1969. But this time he didn't stare with regret. He stared with something closer to peace. She didn't fix him. He whispered to the photo. She reminded him he was never broken. The morning after felt different. For the first time in years, Elena woke not to the bite of cold pavement, but to sunlight spilling through a curtain. She blinked against it, confused at first, until she felt the softness beneath her mattress sheet's pillow and the steady sound of breathing just outside her door. Shadow. He was there, stretched across the hallway like a silent sentinel, ears twitching as if keeping guard. Elena lay still for a moment, just listening. And in that silence, something inside her shifted. Safety. She had almost forgotten what it felt like. Breakfast was waiting in the dining room. Not scraps, not whatever she could scrounge, but a plate of eggs, toast, and fruit. Victor sat at the head of the long mahogany table, a newspaper folded neatly beside his coffee. He didn't say much. He wasn't a man of words. But when Elena walked in, his eyes softened just enough to be noticed. "Eat," he said simply. She did, slowly savoring every bite, as if the food might vanish if she rushed. Shadow lay at her feet, calm, watchful, his tail thumping once against the floor. Later that day, Victor made a call. By the next week, Elena had a school uniform, a backpack, and an enrollment form with her name on it. She clutched the bag like treasure, her small hands gripping the straps, as if letting go might wake her from a dream. At first, the other kids whispered, a girl who had shown up out of nowhere, living in the estate of a billionaire, walking every morning with a dog that looked like it belonged in war. Elena heard the murmurs, felt the stares, but she didn't shrink. She sat through classes, raised her hand when she knew the answer, and when she didn't, she listened with the kind of hunger that comes from years of being denied the chance. And every afternoon, Shadow waited at the gate. The sight of him, black coat, gleaming eyes alert, was enough to silence anyone who thought of mocking her. He wagged his tail only when she appeared trotting beside her on the walk back up the hill toward the house. Victor began to change too. His mornings no longer felt like rituals performed in an empty mausoleum. Now he made coffee, read the paper, and packed a small lunch bag with Elena's name written carefully on the side. In the evenings, he found himself listening. Really listening as Elena recounted what she had learned that day, her voice gaining strength with every story. The walls of the estate, once heavy with silence, began to hum with life again. It wasn't about the $1 million anymore. It never had been. It was about something that money could never buy, being seen, being safe, being believed in, even just once. One afternoon, weeks later, Victor stood by the window of his study watching Elena and Shadow through the glass. She was in the yard tossing a ball across the grass. Shadow chased after it with the energy of a pup, his growl replaced by playful barks. The sound echoed off the trees, light and alive. Victor held the old photograph in his hand, Me and Ranger, 1969. He looked at the boy in the picture, at the innocence he had long buried, and felt something he hadn't in decades. Not regret, not grief, but peace. She reminded me too, he murmured. That evening, Elena curled into her bed. Shadow stretched across the doorway. She whispered into the dark, almost to herself. Thank you. She didn't know if she was thanking Victor or Shadow or the universe itself. Maybe all three. The world outside still rushed, still forgot, still left children like her behind. But here, in this corner of Virginia, she had carved out a new truth, safety, trust, and a place to belong. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. If you're listening to this story, maybe you felt like Elena at some point, unseen, unheard, carrying battles no one else knew. Or maybe you've known a shadow, someone or something the world called broken, when really all it needed was patience. Stories like this remind us healing doesn't always come from strength or wealth. Sometimes it comes from the quiet courage to stay, to listen, to believe. If this story touched you, share it with someone who might need the reminder. Leave a comment, tell me what part struck you most, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story. Together we can keep alive the tales that remind us what it means to be human.